The curse awaits, a doll's dark secret. Clara didn't know it yet, but the doll she found at the estate sale would become the nightmare she could never escape. Once it claimed her soul, there would be no returning. The strange estate sale. Claire had always been drawn to oddities, the kind of treasures that most people would overlook. On a crisp Saturday morning in late October, she found herself at a quaint estate sale in a sleepy New England town. The air smelled of fallen leaves and old wood. The house was filled with items from a bygone era, dusty books, tarnished silverware, and faded photographs. She wandered through the tables, touching things that whispered of forgotten histories. But her eyes were drawn to one object, perched on a wooden shelf at the back of the room. It was a porcelain doll with cracked cheeks, chipped paint, and a smile that seemed more sinister than sweet. Its glassy eyes glimmered in the dim light, as though it was watching her every move. The doll felt alive. The elderly man running the sale saw her staring at it and approached slowly. "Ah, the doll," he said with a heavy sigh. "It's been passed through generations. They say it's cursed, that it carries the spirit of its original owner." Clara chuckled nervously, brushing off the old man's words. "I doubt it." "But it's certainly unique," she replied, reaching for her wallet. She could feel the man's gaze on her as she paid, but she didn't think much of it at the time. The doll was hers now. A sinister move. That evening, Clara placed the doll on a shelf in her bedroom, next to her collection of antique books. She had never felt so drawn to an object before, but something about it intrigued her. She turned off the light and crawled into bed, the doll's eyes seeming to follow her. It wasn't long before she drifted into a restless sleep. Around 2 a.m., Clara awoke with a start. The room felt suffocating, as if the air had thickened around her. She was sweating, heart pounding, but there was no visible reason for her sudden terror. She glanced toward the shelf, and her blood ran cold. The doll was no longer where she had left it. It sat on the floor, positioned perfectly at the foot of her bed, facing her. Clara's pulse quickened, and she jumped out of bed to return the doll to its place. Her hands shook as she placed it back on the shelf, convincing herself it was just her imagination or a prank played by her mind. But the unease didn't fade. Every night, she felt watched. The doll seemed to move on its own, inching closer and closer to the edge of the shelf. And no matter how many times she moved it back, it always returned to the same position, on the floor, staring at her. The whispers in the dark. Clara couldn't sleep anymore. Her nights were filled with whispers, barely audible but distinct, coming from the shadows. She would wake in the dark hours, staring at the corners of her room, convinced that something was there. But when she turned on the lights, there was nothing, just the doll, always waiting. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. One night, Clara was jolted awake by a sharp knock on her bedroom door. She rushed to open it, only to find no one there. But on her walls, in eerie, childlike scrawl, the words appeared. "I'm here. You can't escape." Panic surged through her veins. Clara tried to convince herself she was just tired, that stress was playing tricks on her mind. But deep down, she knew that something far darker was at work. She searched online, desperately looking for any information on the doll. What she discovered chilled her to the core. The doll, she learned, had once belonged to a woman named Margaret. Margaret was not just any ordinary woman. She was rumored to have been a witch, practicing dark rituals in an attempt to transfer her soul into the doll to achieve immortality. The townspeople said the doll was cursed, that it carried the evil spirit of Margaret, and that whoever possessed it would suffer the consequences. The curse unveiled. Clara could no longer deny it. The doll was cursed. She had to get rid of it. But no matter what she did, it always came back. She tried burning it in the fireplace, but the flames wouldn't touch it. She tried burying it deep in the woods, but it reappeared on her doorstep the next morning, as if mocking her efforts. Each time, its eyes seemed to gleam more brightly, its smile growing wider, as if it were enjoying her torment. The haunting wasn't just limited to the doll anymore. Strange things began to happen around her home, furniture shifting on its own, objects vanishing, only to appear in the most unlikely places. Clara would hear footsteps behind her when no one was there, and the walls of her house would groan and creak at night, as if the very house was alive. It was as though the doll's curse had taken over her entire world. Trapped in a nightmare. In a last-ditch effort to free herself, Clara reached out to a local priest who specialized in the occult. He agreed to perform an exorcism on the doll, warning her that if the ritual failed, it could unleash something far worse. That night, Clara sat in the dimly lit living room, watching the priest prepare for the ritual. The air felt heavy, oppressive. He began chanting in a language Clara didn't understand, his voice trembling with fear as the atmosphere thickened around them. The doll, sitting on the table in front of them, seemed to come to life, its eyes flashing, its porcelain face contorting into a twisted grin. Clara's heart raced. She could feel the evil presence in the room, growing stronger by the second. The priest's chanting grew louder, more frantic as he tried to expel the spirit. But suddenly, the room was filled with an ear-piercing screeching sound. The walls cracked, the floor shook, and flames erupted from the corners of the room, as if the very foundation of the house had been torn apart by the curse. The priest was thrown back, his voice silenced by the roar of the flames. Clara screamed, but her voice was drowned by the inferno that consumed the room. Through the smoke, she saw the doll, untouched by the fire, standing in the center of the room, its smile wider than ever. The final ritual. The fire department found Clara's house reduced to ashes, with no sign of Clara's body. It was as if she had been swallowed by the flames, leaving nothing behind. The only thing they found was the doll, sitting unscathed in the rubble. It was eerily clean, as though the fire had no effect on it. The fire that consumes. Weeks later, an estate sale was held in a neighboring town, and there, sitting on the table, was the cursed doll. Its glassy eyes stared out from the shelf, waiting patiently for its next victim, ready to repeat the cycle once again. The curse lives on. The doll never forgets. And neither should you. Would you dare take it home? If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to subscribe to Spectral Tales for more chilling, true, and fictional horror stories. And let us know in the comments, would you ever buy a doll if it was cursed?